What happens when the country that invented the modern car decides it does not want your cars anywhere near its roads? Washington says the answer is simple. Chinese electric vehicles are subsidized. They are unfairly cheap. They may collect sensitive data. They may give Beijing a back door into American infrastructure. But there is another explanation, and it is much more uncomfortable. America may not be blocking Chinese cars because they are weak. It may be blocking them because they are becoming too competitive too quickly in the exact industry that will define the next decade. In 2024, the United States raised the tariff rate on Chinese electric vehicles to 100%. Then Washington moved beyond tariffs. New connected vehicle rules targeted software and hardware linked to China and Russia. The language was national security. The practical effect was much broader. Even a car assembled somewhere else could face restrictions if its digital systems were considered Chinese. The official explanation is not automatically fake. A connected car is a rolling computer. It can see where you drive, what networks it touches, and what software controls it. Governments have a legitimate reason to care about that. But security is only one layer of this story. The deeper fear is that the car is no longer just a car. The old Detroit formula was simple: a body, an engine, for wheels, and a lot of steel. The new electric vehicle is a battery platform, a software stack, a chip system, a data terminal, and a manufacturing network on wheels. Whoever controls that platform does not just sell vehicles. They influence batteries, charging, operating systems, artificial intelligence, mobility data, and the suppliers that make all of it cheap enough to reach ordinary consumers. That is why the conflict is bigger than a few Chinese brands entering American dealerships. If Chinese companies became normal on American streets, Chinese batteries, software, sensors, and digital ecosystems could become part of everyday American mobility. The argument from Washington is, keep the system secure before dependence becomes irreversible. The argument from Beijing, and from the Chinese industrial view behind this video, is, security has become a convenient word for stopping a competitor that the market cannot easily beat. America has used this playbook before. In the 1970s, two oil crises turned fuel economy from a niche advantage into a national obsession. American manufacturers were still selling enormous, thirsty vehicles. Japanese companies were selling smaller cars that were cheaper to run. The market did not need a lecture. It needed less gasoline. Toyota and Honda walked through that opening with compact, efficient vehicles. When Japanese cars began taking serious share, the United States did not simply sit back and celebrate consumer choice. In 1981, Washington pressured Japan into a so-called voluntary export restraint. Japan limited the number of cars it could send to the American market. Later, the Plaza Accord and pressure for local production changed the economics again. Japanese companies responded by building factories inside the United States. The foreign threat was converted into local jobs, local tax revenue, and a controlled version of competition. That history does not prove that China is Japan. It proves something more important. When a foreign auto industry becomes politically dangerous, America has never treated free trade as an unbreakable rule. Now look at the Chinese advantage. First, scale. China has an enormous domestic market in which dozens of automakers compete at the same time. Scale spreads tooling, research, software, and factory costs across millions of vehicles. Second, supply chain density. Batteries, motors, power electronics, wiring, glass, semiconductors, and industrial equipment can be sourced within a much tighter manufacturing ecosystem than most competitors can match. Third, batteries. China is not merely assembling electric cars. Chinese companies occupy powerful positions across battery cells, materials, refining, cathodes, anodes, and processing equipment. That matters because the battery is the cost center and the strategic bottleneck of an electric vehicle. Fourth, manufacturing speed. Chinese factories have spent years combining automation, aggressive cost control, and fast product cycles. A new model can move from design to mass production with a speed that traditional Western organizations often struggle to match. Fifth, engineering depth. The advantage is not one genius company. It is a large labor market of engineers, suppliers, software teams, and contract manufacturers learning from one another under brutal competition. And finally, the uncomfortable advantage: domestic price competition. Chinese companies have fought each other so aggressively that technical upgrades arrive quickly and margins get squeezed. That is painful for individual firms, but powerful for consumers. There is an important distinction here. A tariff can change the price of an imported car overnight. It cannot create a battery industry overnight. It cannot produce a dense supplier network, a decade of engineering experience, or a factory culture built around rapid iteration. That is why the policy debate is so tense. If the United States is only trying to buy time for its own manufacturers, tariffs may be a defensive bridge. If it is trying to permanently prevent Chinese technology from becoming normal, then the policy is no longer just trade policy. It is an attempt to decide who is allowed to build the future. And there is a genuine counterargument. A government does not have to wait for a foreign platform to become dominant before it worries about surveillance, data access, military use, or critical infrastructure. It is reasonable to ask what a connected car can record, where that data travels, and who can update the software. But reasonable security screening is different from treating an entire national industrial system as permanently illegitimate. The more categories a rule covers, the car, the software, the sensor, the battery, the supplier, the more difficult it becomes to separate security from industrial exclusion. This is why saying Chinese cars are cheap because of subsidies is not a complete explanation. Subsidies may matter. Industrial policy may matter. But scale, supply chains, engineering, and competition matter too. The American contradiction is that the country can block Chinese badges without instantly replacing the Chinese industrial base underneath the global EV industry. Tesla is the clearest symbol. The brand is American. Its Shanghai operation is deeply connected to Chinese factories, engineers, suppliers, logistics, and manufacturing discipline. The United States can restrict a Chinese car logo while American companies continue to benefit from Chinese production capabilities. That is not a secret plot. It is what dependence looks like in a global supply chain. So can Chinese cars enter the United States? Probably not through a simple flood of finished vehicles from Chinese factories. The political barriers are too high, and the security rules are designed to close obvious routes. But markets are creative. Entry could happen through technology licensing, a joint venture, a battery partnership, a North American assembly plant, or a deal with an American company that wants the technology more than it wants to defend an old business model. If that happens, the biggest losers may not be Ford or Tesla. American companies can partner, localize, or change their suppliers. The companies most exposed could be traditional foreign brands that depend on the American market but are late to electric software and battery technology. That is the real argument. Is America closing the door because Chinese cars are a security threat? Or is security being used to protect an industry that is losing control of the next platform? The honest answer may be both. Security concerns can be real, and protectionism can be real. The question is which one is driving the policy, and who gets to define the word security. Would you call this national security or protectionism? Follow me, and I will take you inside the real story of China.